Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're talking about a really exciting topic, which is Microsoft Loop. So it's got huge potential as a really cool app. So Anna Marika is going to step us through that today. I see other people are still joining. So while they're joining, I'll just do the usual housekeeping. So we've turned on Q&A. So there's a little Q&A bar at the top. So if, as we're running through this, if you have any questions, just jot them down in there. As Anna Marika's presenting, I'll be taking charge of that Q&A panel. So yeah, feel free to engage. That's the value of joining live rather than watching the recordings, is you get to ask questions. So yeah, if you want to, Q&A's at the top. The other bit of housekeeping, of course, is we are recording it. I did mention, so we'll be sharing out the recording by the time I've trimmed and edited it a little bit. So maybe by Friday, if not by Monday. I think that's probably about it for housekeeping. I usually have a little notepad of things I'm supposed to say, but I think that's it. So next time, maybe I'll do myself a loop and then we can check that list off. Okay, over to you, Anna Marika.
Great, thanks, Ian, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Ian said, this is a nice wee tool to step you all through. It's got great potential in terms of different ways that you can be using it inside your organisation. So we probably want to start with what is Loop. Some of you may already be using it. It might be completely new to a lot of you. So just to give you a bit of a rundown, it is one of those ones that's a little bit hard to explain because it does a whole range of different things. So we've got a little bit of a video to help you see, because seeing is obviously a lot easier than having things explained. So what is Loop? It's a collaborative connected workspace, and in the words of Microsoft, to help you think, plan, and create together in real time. What it does is it provides you with a powerful, flexible canvas that we then add portable components to. Now, those components move freely with you between different applications and they stay completely in sync. So we can create it in one place, something like a to-do list, and then move it into another application like an Outlook email that we're sending out to people, or we can put it into a Teams post or a Teams chat. And as people tick off their items on that task list, it's going to synchronize across all of those different places. So you're not needing to go and update an email or update a Teams conversation. It does that automatically for you. You could say it's similar to OneNote. There are differences between the two, and there are still benefits to using OneNote. So it's not that it's negating the OneNote, but it has better sharing and collaboration capabilities. For some, you might feel better in OneNote, others may feel better in Loop, or you can use the two together if you like. For those of you that have used Notion or know what Notion is, it's a competitive product, if you like, to Notion. This is included, or Loop is included in your M365 subscription. So it comes as standard as part of your subscription. We use it to do things like brainstorming ideas, manage your project planning, task organization, sharing content between each other. And the way that we access it is that we can access it through the dedicated Loop app, or we can use it inside the common apps that you use on a regular basis, like Teams and Outlook and so on. Once you get familiar with that Loop icon, you'll start to see it in lots of different places, and you'll know then that you can be using it in those different spaces.
Say goodbye to the frustration of jumping between apps and losing track of documents and ideas. Microsoft Loop transforms the way you work, so you can think, plan, and create together like never before. Loop is made up of workspaces, pages, and components. Let's break it down. Create together with shared workspaces for each of your projects. On the Loop homepage, you can access all your existing workspaces and create new ones. In a Loop workspace, you can bring everything you need for your project together in one place. To kick off a workspace, Loop can even do the searching for you, making it easy to add existing project-related information and organize it into pages. Continue adding to your workspace as your project evolves and organize it the way you want. Loop pages are flexible canvases where you can react, comment, and build on each other's ideas. Notifications help you track the things you care about and focus on what matters, all while staying in the flow of your work. Copilot in Loop helps you ideate and co-create. Get inspired with AI-powered contextual suggestions to transform the way you create together. Don't let app barriers slow your project down. Easily share information with people outside your workspace with Loop Components. Components are portable pieces of content that stay in sync across all the places they have been shared, no matter where they are updated. You can share components and create new ones, like lists, tables, paragraphs, and more, across your favorite Microsoft 365 apps. You're always in control because it's easy to see where components were shared and who has access. However you work, wherever you work, Loop enables teams to think, plan, and create together like never before.
There we go. So that's the video there, and some of you may have caught a glimpse of that Loop logo that I said that you'll start to get familiar with. Now, I said to you, Loop can be accessed in a couple of different ways. So we can access it via the browser, and the link that I've got in a few slides later on, but this is it sitting inside of the browser. Down here on the left-hand side is how it looks inside of Teams. Now, it won't naturally be there for you. You will need to add it as an app onto your Teams app bar, but you can then see your Loop button and it will open up the same screen as what you're seeing on the right-hand side, but within your Teams environment. Plus, you can also access it from those different apps that I talked about as well. Now, what is Loop? Loop is made up of three different parts. We've got workspaces, pages, and components. The workspace is the big space that we start with. It's where we pull all our different information together. So if you like, it's a big container to house all the information inside of. We place pages inside of that workspace, and we can have multiple pages and subpages inside the workspace. On the pages, we put components, and the components are the parts that can move between the different applications. Some examples of components are text, lists, checklists, tasks, tables, etc. And as mentioned, we can share those across different applications. Let's drill into each of those ones separately. So a workspace we mentioned is a container where you keep your resources. You can create yourself different workspaces for different projects. And I say create yourself, but it's generally an organizational wide thing. It might be for a department, it might be a project. You create the workspace that you need and share it out to the group of people that need access to that workspace. Inside of that workspace, we'll create pages and subpages. So you can see in the little picture here that we've got a navigation pane, and those are our different pages that are contained inside of the workspace. When we click on a page, it will then show on the right-hand side of the window like we're seeing in this image. In the hierarchy of those pages and subpages, allows you to build out the structure that you need to suit the style of work that you're doing inside of that workspace. We then have components, and components are the items that we add inside the page to build up the page. They are able to be moved into different applications, and that little Giphy that you're seeing on the right-hand side is the same component but being exposed in three different applications. So we've got it inside of Teams, we've got it inside of Loop, and we've got it inside of Outlook. And as it gets changed at one, it's getting changed in all of the others, so they stay in sync. They're live, interactive, collaborative objects. They're portable, meaning that we can move them around between those different applications, and they stay in sync. Plus, you may notice as well that it's real-time collaboration as people are co-authoring. So as somebody else is typing, you can see what they're typing while you're inside the component yourself. All right, here's a little video just showing some of the different components that can come in here. There's a range of different types. Generally, when we go to add a component, we type the backslash, and it will then give you a list of the different components available. You choose your component, and it will then add that component onto the page, and you then build up what you want inside of that component. Recently, Loop has had a bit of an upgrade. So it's been in about the last month or so that it's been rolling out this upgrade, and it's Loop 2.0. The changes have been to make changes to the UI. So it's quite a different look and feel to how it was originally. It also has a new URL. That's a bit of a tongue twister, that one. And there's that URL that I was telling you about. So that's what you'll use to open up the browser app for Loop. It's had extra components added into there, one of which is things like a meeting notes tab. The box on the right-hand side takes you through what some of the new updated features are inside a Loop, and I'm going to be taking you through features generally, and some of them are the new features, and some of the features are ones that have already been in existence. So we'll hone in on those as we go through our presentation today. So let's see Loop in action. One of the first slides here is talking about how we can, on some of the components, create what they're calling automations inside of that Loop component. Now, they're not true automations for those of you that have worked with us to create automations. These are more rules that act like an automation. So it might be that you've changed the status on a line item in the table, as is the case in this particular one, and when the status changes, you want something to happen. So in this example, the phase has changed, and if it equals market research, then we can choose what we want it to do. So do we want to notify people? Do we want to send a message via Teams or an email, etc.? And that when somebody makes a change on that status and it goes to market research, it will automatically trigger the sending of the email. So that's quite handy that you can manage those basic rules/automations yourself without having to build the full automation. You can, if you need to, build further automations, in which case you need to come and touch base with us and we can work that through with you. Now, when you put a component into a place other than your Loop app, you may be wanting to know where it's been saved to, because you may forget that you've put it in Outlook and you've put it in Teams, etc. So it's good to be able to see where that particular component has been landed and who it's been shared with. So we can come up to the buttons in the top right-hand corner here and ask it to show us where the item's been shared, what those locations are, and who it is that has had it shared with them. Planner into Loop. So for those of you that have been using Planner, and as you know, we did a webinar a little while back on Planner as well. If you're using Planner, we can bring that plan from Planner into Loop. So there's no need to duplicate items. We take the link from Planner and put it inside the Loop space. Or if you're not currently working in Planner, you can create task lists from inside of Loop, and it will then naturally build a plan for you inside of Planner and sync the two together. So you can manage the plan either from Loop or from inside of Planner, and the updates that you make in either one of those spaces will synchronize in both of those two places. So it doesn't matter where you work, you'll see the same content coming through. Working with meeting notes, when you create a brand new meeting invite, you have the ability to add meeting notes into that invite. Now, a lot of us ignore it if we're creating a brand new meeting, but right down in the bottom left-hand corner, there is a little button there that says add an agenda. When you click on that, it opens up a bigger space, which is our Loop component, and in that space it has our meeting notes component, and in there you can start to type out your agenda items, your meeting notes, any follow-up tasks that you want. When the meeting starts, that list of items that you've just created will show in the Teams meeting call as well, so people are able to see it as you go through the meeting. So to show you what that looks like when you're inside the meeting, And granted, I know it's quite small, but I wanted to get the text in the different versions of meeting notes up here. So when you open up your Teams meeting and you're undertaking the meeting itself, it will show you your agenda, the contents, and so on, and the pane on the right-hand side. So that's where we can switch between people and chat and so on. Meeting notes is another one of the items that you can switch between. When we're inside the Teams meeting, if you hadn't started the meeting notes from the invite, you can start the meeting notes from inside the meeting as well. So you can activate it there and add notes and agendas and to-do items inside that meeting note space as the meeting is taking place. You can add additional components into the meeting notes as well by using that backslash. When we do the backslash, it will open up this little window here showing you what different components you can add in there. Now, one of the components that it does have in there is the ability to get Copilot to do some work for us inside the meeting notes. Now, you will need a Copilot license for this. So if you don't have it, you won't be able to use it. But for those of you that do have the Copilot notes, we can get it to, for example, summarize what's taken place in the meeting so that it can be sent to the senior stakeholders. So in this example, in the middle window, the prompt has been added to say, please create a summary of the meeting and the topics covered so that it would be suitable for senior stakeholders. And then on the right-hand side, it has produced that content so we can then lift that and send it through to the senior stakeholders. The meeting notes, if you are utilising them, they will go back to the Loop app as well. And there is a tab in the left pane that allows you to see all of your meeting notes. And they can be categorised by meeting type or date, etc. So you can search those notes and the contents as well. If you're working with recurring meetings, it's smart enough to group all of those recurring meetings together and then just have a date listed for each of the different meetings for you to be able to see the notes from those meetings. It's quite a handy tool inside of the Teams meeting space. A question that's been asked for a while for people that have been with Loop is, can we please share this content externally? Now, originally when Loop came out, you couldn't, but a new feature that has been rolled out is the ability to be able to share externally, which everyone's very excited about. There are a few caveats around the sharing externally, but the great thing is that we can get it up and running. Now, the external sharing can apply to the workspace. So that means everything in that workspace will be shared with the external party. Or it could be just a page inside that workspace, or it might be an individual component inside a page. So you can specify what it is that you're sharing externally. When you share it externally, you can specify whether the person that's being granted the permissions is allowed to edit that item or if they're only allowed view-only permissions. Plus, you can set an expiry. The sharing experience is the same as what you're used to using when you share a document from either SharePoint or Teams, and I'll show you the window for that in just a moment. Now, I said to you there's a couple of caveats. Here's one of them. If your organisation has sensitivity labels enabled, you will not be able to do the external sharing yet. It is coming. At the moment, they are working on rolling out sensitivity labels for Loop, and once that becomes available, then the external sharing will also be enabled for those with sensitivity labels inside their organisation. You can still do everything else if you've got sensitivity labels activated in your organisation. You just can't do that external sharing yet, and it's supposed to become available later this year, so it shouldn't be too far away. Sharing generally is subject to the same administration policies that you have across your organisation, and it bases itself on the OneDrive and SharePoint tenant settings. So for those of you that are in the admin space, that's where the sharing is coming from. I said to you, I'd show you what it would look like when you do your external sharing. So the image on the right-hand side is that same window that we're used to seeing when we share documents through Teams and through SharePoint. So that's all familiar to us, which is great. Now, the step ahead of that is when we're inside of the Loop app, we go to the top right-hand corner and we have a share button, and we then select, is it the workspace, the page, or the Loop component that we want to share, and then we specify what our sharing settings are, making sure that we stipulate which individuals it is that we're granting permission to. You'll see a wee note there on the page that you can only add guest users who already have a guest account in your tenant. Now, from certain places, it will do that automatically for you. But if you have a user that doesn't have an existing guest account, then you need to share a page with them first that will get them active as a guest in your tenant. And after that, you should be able to share a workspace. Now, you may need to allow a few hours for that to be activated, but that's the steps required at this point in time. We can track notifications. So you saw in that video that people were able to comment and share items and add things and make changes inside the Loop component. So if you're wanting to keep track of what's taking place, there's a notification section inside of Loop for you to be able to see that. And it's got a similar look and feel to the activity button inside of Teams for those of you that are used to that. Another feature that has recently come into Loop, which is quite nice, is the tracking your project status. So you've got all of your project information stored inside your Loop if you're using it for projects. We now have the ability to see how things are progressing inside our Loop workspace using the status. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little red box here with the number 1 next to it that says status. When you click on that, it will open up the red box on the right-hand side, and it has predetermined headings for us. The headings are workspace highlights, tasks, team recaps, and status labels. So let's have a look at what each of those do. So in the workplace insights, it's telling you how many outstanding tasks there are, what's needing done, etc. We then have a task section which shows us how our tasks are tracking, and we can drill into individual tasks. You're also able to group those tasks in different ways. So maybe you want to see how the different team members in the space, how many tasks there are assigned to each of those individuals and how they're tracking on those tasks. We've got recaps, which give a recap of what's taking place inside your project. And if you're using status labels, it gives you a section advising you on how the status labels are tracking as well. Now, we can also use Copilot and Loop together, and we can ask Copilot to draft or add content inside of our Copilot. So on the image on the right-hand side, it gives an example of how we can ask Copilot to draft page content for us. We can also get it to brainstorm ideas for us, rewrite and summarize content. So if we had information on a page, we can ask it to summarize what's in there. We might want it to generate a page similar to one we used on a previous project, but update it for this new project, in which case it will generate that page for us with all the elements that we had in our previous one, but updated to our new project. It can also provide us with a recap of all the activity that's taken place, so you can get a feel for what's happening inside of the page or the workspace that you are looking at. And we can ask it to convert items. So maybe you had it as a bullet list and you want to change it to be a table, and it can do those things. You do need to have a Copilot license to be able to use those features. If you are sharing an item that's been created by Copilot with other users, they do not need to have the license. So it's just you as the creator that needs it, not the other users inside your workspace.
Kickstart team collaboration in one place with Microsoft Copilot in Loop. Let's add a social media plan to our company's 10-year anniversary marketing campaign. We can choose a template from the bottom of the Loop page or select Draft with Copilot. Draft a full page of content for a social media plan for the company's 10-year anniversary. Include lists, headings, and tables. There it is, an outline for a social media plan that we can refine and start inviting teammates for their ideas. Copilot can help rewrite content too. Let's ask, include an anniversary giveaway table similar to the social media calendar. Looks good. And as the team keeps making changes, you'll see who contributed ideas to the loop.
Access to Loop. So Loop components are available to anyone who has access to Teams, Outlook, Word Online, Whiteboard, OneNote, SharePoint, OneDrive, Loop, and all your other and other supported Microsoft apps. The Loop app, most features are available to everybody who has a work or school account, normally Entra account or an Azure AD account. For those of you that are not in the admin side of things, don't worry, your admins will know what that's all about. And anybody with access to the Loop app can view the Loop pages and components and anything that they've recently created. Now, you do have to have a set in place to be able to access all the Loop features. So there are two levels of access. You've got the basic access, and then there are some features that are only available to those who have particular Microsoft licenses. And these are listed here. So you'll notice that they are Microsoft 365 licenses as opposed to Office 365 licenses. And that is a distinction here. If you are using the Office 365 licenses, have a chat to your MSPs. There is a package that you can add in and it's free of charge, which is the Microsoft 365 Extra Features plan. And that will enable you to be able to use the features. Now, the feature that you get granted with these licenses is the ability to create a new Loop workspace. And most people are going to want to create a Loop workspace. So that's quite a critical one there, and that you can add and remove members from that workspace. A couple of considerations when you make a decision to work with Loop or not, particularly from an organizational point of view, is where are all of these items being saved? And the table on the right-hand side shows us, depending on what the item is, where that item is going to be saved. And you can see that it's been saved in a range of different places. It might be going into OneDrive, it might be going into the SharePoint side, or it might be going into SharePoint Embedded. SharePoint Embedded is not a standard SharePoint site. It has some of the similar functionality to what we have inside a SharePoint, but it's not something that you can truly access. It's more set up just to have the functionality for certain applications, of which Loop is one of them. Is it being backed up? Items that are being saved into your OneDrive go through the same backup as your OneDrive. So as long as you've got your OneDrive being backed up, you'll have your Loop components being backed up as well. If your SharePoint site is being backed up, those will get backed up. The embedded, we're needing to get a little bit more information on that one to understand the full implications on backup of that side of things. If you have any business critical data, then you may not want to be putting it into that space until we've got a full answer on that space. Another consideration is what happens if somebody leaves the organization and they were the creator of your workspace. Now, we're talking workspace here as opposed to pages and components. So when an individual leaves, they are still considered the owner, and we can't assign a new owner at this point in time to the Loop space. So you do need to be aware of that. Make sure that you add the members that you need into that space before an owner leaves. But as we say, these are considerations, things that you need to think about, and you may just want to not have business critical data inside of Loop at this point in time and have it more as an interactive space where people can be working. So we'll leave those thoughts with you. Administering Loop access and permissions. So IT administrators who set the organizational policy can enable or disable the ability to create new Loop workspaces, pages, or components. So if you decide that you don't want staff to be using Loop, you can disable that access. It is enabled there for you for as long as you've got the licenses, people are able to go in and create those loops. Access to Loop can be turned off by admins as well. Even if they turn off Loop, generally there are still some aspects of Loop that will still be available to staff. So that's just something to be aware of as well. So it can be turned off for the whole organization or for specific users. And it can also be disabled in certain apps. So you might decide, I don't want it in this app, but I do want it in that app. So it can be done that way as well. And another consideration is that your content in Loop counts towards your tenant storage. So it is considered part of that storage. All right, now that takes us to our Q&A. A couple of questions that we thought might be sitting in your minds is, do you need a special license? Now we've covered that in the slides earlier. So the answer is you can be using it with the basic features on any license as long as you've got a Microsoft license there. But if you're wanting to have the full functionality, then you need to make sure you have one of those Microsoft 365 licenses that we listed earlier. Is there a mobile app available for Loop? And the answer is yes, there is. And you access it the same as all the other Office apps, and that's through your App Store, and then install it on your phone using your username and password. If you want to find out more, get in touch with us. We can talk through various use cases and different ways of using it and how to deploy it inside your organization. And if you need training, we can provide you with that as well. And that takes us through to the end of the slide. So you can see we've got our next webinar coming up on Wednesday, the 16th of October. Before I run through that, Ian, were there any other questions that came through?
Yeah, we got one from Catherine. Hopefully I answered that one, but just essentially what's the difference between sharing a whole workspace, a page, or a component? So ultimately, you know, you're sharing the entire content if you're sharing the workspace. So that's all of the pages, subpages, and content within that workspace. If you share just a page, you're just sharing the content within the page. And if you share just a component, let's say a task list, they will only see then the task list itself. And as people are updating that task list, you'll see it in context of the whole page, but they would only see that individual component. So yeah, Loop's a really cool thing. I made a couple of notes myself as well, just while you were running through this. So one reason I didn't use it early on in the space was when it first came out, it just seemed to be another app with another task list of tasks that I'd have to remember to go and find and check off as I work through them. But now with that Planner integration, it makes it a lot more seamless that I could have tasks in Planner, I could have tasks in my Loop components, and I can like consolidate them all. Again, like I said in the last webinar where we talked about task management, the Loop tasks actually also appear in the Planner app inside of Teams. So I can actually filter my task list by just Loop tasks, and I can complete them off in there. I think it's a really cool use case for kind of general project management, because you could create project templates, like workspace templates, that has like project phases and things like that with task lists and all sorts already created in there. So you can share those with your customers. Again, like I mentioned last time, the challenge, we would use it ourselves, but we have to capture time, because that's how we generate our revenue, is by billing time. And therefore, we can't actually use it for our own project management. We have to use a different system. But when it comes to the risks, we often talk to clients about data governance and security. So going back to that considerations page, you do have to really consider whether it is being backed up. I think it's okay to use it for information that at the end of the day, if you lose it, it's not going to close down your business. It's just more of an annoyance. So you just have to consider that, because, of course, if you're not getting backups and for some reason it gets corrupted or you lose access to your Microsoft tenant, how are you going to get that data back out again? So just double check, like speak to your IT providers or your MSPs about what content is being backed up to make sure that you're capturing OneDrive, SharePoint. At the moment, the workspace data, I don't believe is a tool being backed up by any provider, because that is, I don't think Microsoft have released the APIs yet to enable the backup providers to be able to do that. But if it's saved within your OneDrive and within SharePoint, then it would be captured. And I've done some test restores on our own backup as well, and it works seamlessly. So I recommend you reach out to your IT providers if you are going to start using Loop across the organization. And then the other thing is to note is there's no recycle bin and there's no kind of like retention. There's the permissions are edit or not edit, and therefore once you give someone edit access, you're giving them the rights to delete, close tasks, remove tasks, add tasks. There's not so much in the security control.
I might just jump in there, Ian. We have a recycle bin inside of a workspace, but you don't have a recycle bin for a deleted workspace.
For the actual workspace.
So if items are deleted from inside of a workspace, you can get those back again. But if you delete the workspace completely at this point in time, it can't be called back. But that's where these backups we're hoping are going to come in, and hopefully they will address it as a known item inside a Loop that they want to rectify.
But it is a super productive tool. It's really cool to be able to just in the Teams chat spin up a new Loop component. Like Anna-Marika and I do use them for kind of non-project related stuff. We'll just be like, we need to talk about this list of things. I can see it. I can modify it and add my own things we need to talk about. And I can even answer some of them before we even jump on the call. I can just jot some notes down. So it is a super, super cool collaborative space. Catherine's just dropped another question in. So is the intent to use the space as a collaborative space and then move deliverables to a final document or to a different space? Well, you could do. I mean, that comes down to your own, business processes. If you want to create a snapshot of that point in time when you have, completed that work, then I guess you could copy it off. I wouldn't say that was a requirement. Like that's not the intention of the tool. Once you've closed off those tasks or your project is documented, you just leave it in that Loop space. And then kind of
add into that, you can also export the pages as PDFs. So if you're needing to capture that point in time and share it with somebody as a PDF that's going to be sent out, you can do that, or save that PDF into a different file space. You can do that too.
Yeah. So maybe give it a go. Next time you're emailing the office to ask them to vote for what lunch you're going to serve on Friday, then maybe do the voting list that's part of Loop. So send that around and give it a test. Non-business critical, and therefore we don't have to worry about that being backed up.
Well, thank you all for joining. We've got the details there of our next webinar, which is October the 16th, and it's all about how to do sharing inside of your SharePoint. Well, and more, I think, isn't it, Ian? Yes, Teams and OneDrive.
Essentially, yeah, SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. It's just common problems we see across lots of businesses, how they share. So we thought we'll talk about best practices.
So, thank you all for attending. We'll see you at the next webinar.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.